our workshop. So we will be having this workshop regarding legislative advocacy as well as our Fund 80 proposals. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel to begin this with us.
Yeah, I'll start with legislative advocacy. I think, is it tomorrow the governor presents his budget to the state? So that will be the next step. Up till now, the governor's been gathering information and budget proposals from the various departments. The Department of Public Instruction presented theirs, I think, in early December. And so the governor will present his budget here tomorrow. The next step is the legislature will take up the governor's budget. If recent history holds true, they will likely throw out the governor's budget and start themselves with their own proposal. That is what they've typically done. Different parties, right? So different priorities, and they're going to approach it differently. We can expect probably somewhere in the mid-March to end of March timeframe to have the legislature's budget presented through joint finance. And then they'll debate and negotiate with the governor, the final budget, and hopefully by July 1, we'll have a new budget approved by the legislature and the governor to be implemented for this next fiscal year. There are some distinct opportunities for legislative advocacy as well as some general ones. There's the Day at the Capitol on March 12th. Hard for folks to get away, and depending on how early you want to get up, it's a long drive, but we can also, reserve lodging the night before if need be. But I intend to go down there on March 12th. There's a great AM opportunity to get general information from WASB about legislative advocacy. And then in the afternoon, they set up appointments with our legislators at the Capitol. So you can have direct one-on-ones in the Capitol with those folks. If you're able to make it that March 12th, super great opportunity to do one-on-one legislative advocacy and collective advocacy at the Capitol. And it's always neat to see our representatives in their offices in the Capitol. It makes a difference in terms of our conversations with them. Joint Finance Committee will then have hearings across the state in late March and April. There'll probably be 5 or 6 of them if, past history holds up. And typically there's been one in Eau Claire. And so what I've done the last few years is driven up to Eau Claire to speak to the Joint Finance Committee on the proposed budget. Great opportunity to present Crosse's view on that and what it means to us locally. Education is a large proportion of the budget, about a third, and a lot of people speak on it. What I typically do is I will get up very early, and I will get up there to be in line right away, and I will reserve spots for all of us that want to talk so that folks can show up 2 to 3 hours later if they're interested. So you don't have to be worried about getting there at 6 a.m.
There's a military man right there.
Absolutely. Yes. So get there early and reserve some spots. Otherwise, if you show up, when the door opens, it could be, you could be speaking at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you'll be waiting there all day, which is great to hang out with other people that care about various things, but sometimes it's nice to get in, hear some stuff, and move on with your day. So if you're interested, when those dates come out, I'll let everybody know. And happy to work on carpooling, or if folks just want to show up. We're working with all advocates in our community, both our teachers, our staff, our parents, LPEF, and trying to get a whole host of folks up there to speak at that event. You get about 2 minutes if you're speaking as an individual. You get 5 if you're speaking as a group. So groups of 2 work out well. You get an extra 30 seconds. So that's a strategy.
Is the makeup of joint finance essentially similar to what it has been in the past, or have there been changes in who's on joint finance? They have had budget hearings some years in La Crosse, and sometimes not in La Crosse or Eau Claire, because a lot of times they want to have it in the district of members of joint finance. So I'm just curious if the makeup of joint finance has changed much.
Yeah, there's been dramatic changes this year. So between so there was the redistricting, which changed over a number of assembly seats, and then the Senate's on a two-cycle delay. But because of that redistricting, there's a lot of new faces in the Assembly and the Senate. And so Joint Finance Committee turned over a lot as well. I think there's new chairs from last year and new membership. And so we'll see how it plays out as far as where those are located. They try and do them regionally, but they're not trying to have too many of these meetings. 4 or 5 opportunities typically across the state. I think, it's usually, sometimes there's one up in Rhinelander, another one in Appleton, Milwaukee, and Eau Claire, is typically what it looks like for folks. And those are very important to speak at, and it's made a difference over the last few years. So those are the big opportunities. Then there's always just like email correspondence, which can make a difference as well. We have Representative Doyle, Representative Billings, Representative Johnson, and Senator Paff as our local elected representatives. And I send them emails when bills come out. WASB will notify us of things, so you can kind of keep track of stuff there. And then there's some other organizations I belong to that help provide us updates as well. Just as kind of like a rundown of what's in the education committees right now. There's a bill in the Assembly and the Senate on report cards. They want to go back to those old standards, which I'm not entirely opposed to the old cut scores, so we get some comparability over the years. There's a number of other issues with the report card, though, that make it really unfair for all school districts, and so there's a reason just to get rid of them entirely. So if they're going to open the door on report cards, I got lots of advice for like how to make them better and help our schools instead of just judge them. Jim?
Are they working with some people from the Department of Ed or no superintendent's group?
Yeah, this one's in opposition to the Department of Public Instruction. They were upset that the current administration changed the cut scores, and so they want them just to go back to the way they were. And so the bill is focused on kind of like opposition to what DPI did this last round. They do work with some folks at the UW Madison. WCER, Wisconsin Center for Educational Research. They do their value-added scores and work on some things, so they are talking to experts, in terms of like how to craft these sorts of things, for sure. Another thing that's in the Assembly and the Senate is cursive. This one keeps coming back around, requiring cursive instruction. I know my kids had cursive instruction in 3rd grade. It was like a light unit in their classes, and they enjoyed just like learning how to make different shapes, and it was fun for them. It's helpful to be able to read cursive, but writing is a tool like many other things. I write a lot less than I type these days, and I don't use a slide rule anymore. I use a calculator when I'm trying to do sums, and so I think it's important for our students to have access to the latest technology and for us to judge them on the latest technology. So the cursive one is just kind of this recurring thing that folks care about. I'm not exactly certain, but Jim?
Do we have a background in Wisconsin in terms of how many districts are eliminating cursive versus not? Or in the state, is it a state issue, and how many states have eliminated it?
Yeah, I've never been in a district that eliminated cursive. Every teacher found it valuable to, address it in some way. But in terms of like, if it's a standard that we're required to test kids on, it seems kind of like a waste of time to me. There's more important things we could have our students focused on to that level, Like I said, I want our kids to be able to read cursive if they encounter it, or, to sign their name in a neat way, that makes them look professional. But in terms of having to write in cursive every day, I don't know of very many people that do that
You
anymore.
don't see it hardly any, unless you get people my age or whatever, that's, but it's rare.
Yeah. So that's just one that will come, it's a zombie bill. It will keep coming back up forever.
One more.
yeah.
Is there any requirement yet, or is there not, in terms of keyboarding?
No standards for typing, but as early as, at least as early as third grade, students are required to type an essay for a standardized test. And so that means as soon as second grade, we need to start working on typing instructions so that they can find the letters and complete the task in a reasonable amount of time, so that the technology isn't an obstacle to the understanding. And they can't do it with their thumbs. They have to be able to like hunt and peck at a minimum. So it is an obligation for us, but not a standard that we have to be tested on. So.
I think that was one of my main concerns of high schoolers going back to iPads, is because those keyboards are terrible, and my kids still cannot, they're barely functioning on a keyboard.
Although
Way
it's
bad.
better than on cell phones, because first off, they don't spell anything, everything's abbreviations or just, part of it, and their spelling is horrible. So, I mean, I just, they cruise so fast on it, I don't even, they don't spell check, and neither do I need to do better at that, but I think it has something to say for it all, that we need to do a better job with it.
I follow an op-ed writer on the New York Times who talks about linguistics and language over the years, and he's very conservative in a lot of ways, but he's very open to where language goes and adapting to the time. And if we tried to write like they did the Constitution in 1787, we wouldn't be able to do that. So language changes over time. We'll see how it goes with the emojis. Another bill that's out there is a civics bill that's requiring civics instruction. Nothing particularly wrong with the bill, although we have good civics standards already. What is interesting to me is that it is requiring civics instruction through a specific set of standards, not only in public schools, but also independent charters and private schools. And this is something that doesn't seem particularly conservative, even though it's coming from a conservative group. Requiring more governmental intervention in private schools and independent charters, it's an odd twist to me, and I'm not sure what exactly is going on with that. But it highlights some people's concerns about vouchers and these other governmental influences on private education. A lot of parents choose it to be free of governmental intervention. And so, some of these bills have increasing obligations for private schools and independent charters. And I wonder if that'll start to create a crack in the voucher school movement and how different groups of parents view governmental intervention in their schools. For a lot of folks, it's counterculture. We don't want to be a part of the public thing. We want our own thing. And so that's just an interesting bill that was proposed. So just something to keep aware of, as you're seeing things. Another bill out there in the Assembly and the Senate regarding curriculum inspection. It requires, if somebody submits a request within 10 days, we have to provide any curriculum that was taught to a student within 10 days. And it's not only curriculum documents or textbooks, it's the instructional materials in the classroom.
For
And
how far past?
there's no time limit on how far past.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's just a onerous.
Teachers feel lucky when they can find them again.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
next year, you're like, what did I do last
I
year?
know I
Where's
had a
that handout?
SpongeBob
I saved it in 4
SquarePants genetics
places."
activity. Yeah, exactly.
Outrage.
Wow.
Like a Freedom of Information Act kind of thing?
Yeah, along those lines. We have no trouble sharing textbooks, scope and sequence, the broader curriculum materials, entirely reasonable that we would share that with anyone who asks. But the exact, instructional materials on a given day, which passage did you cover in that book? What was the exact lab materials that you provided for those students? I know that you did a topic of the day from a news article. What was it on March 12th of last year? Those are the sorts of onerous things that could arise that cause unnecessary work, a lot of extra expense for school districts, and would be almost impossible to monitor and open us to incredible lawsuits. And so it's something that I understand the impetus behind it. Oh, we want to know what's going on in our schools. But that level of detail is just unacceptable. There has to be a certain level of trust in our institution. There's another bill regarding finances that wants to ensure that at least 75% of expenses are spent on direct classroom instruction, which, as Patty and I kind of like talked through it, that's certainly the case. The question is, are they going to consider things like reading interventionists, special education instruction, art, music, phy ed? They specifically call out extracurricular activities like athletics, but those are explicitly not direct classroom instruction. And so it's just a very strange bill, you know, intending to like monitor how much money people are spending on schools and specifically where. And it's contrary to kind of like local control. You know, each school district's kind of going to arrange things in different ways and approach education a little bit differently. Everything we do is focused on direct classroom instruction. My job only serves to ensure that teachers can do their job. Patty's job, Jeff's job, all of our jobs is to ensure that teachers can instruct. And all of the support services that we have support that. You know, once upon a time in a one-room schoolhouse, like a teacher had to do everything. And if there was only 30 kids there, that was probably fine, but they were also the custodian, the maintenance person, they had to put the wood in the fireplace, you know, they had to put on the musical and the play. And things were pretty homogenous, but now we have students with English learner needs. You know, we need people to help them do that. That helps a classroom teacher do their job better. Special education, you know, OT, PT, speech language pathology. If we have those folks to help out, then a classroom teacher can do their job better. You know, if we can't count those things as direct classroom instruction, you know, like what are we doing?
Does the
So-
bill specify like that where, does it draw the lines on like what counts as direct instruction or not?
It does not. It would end up going to the DPI, who would have to make like an administrative rule to like talk about what that is, and then we'd have to go to the business office to find out like which codes count as direct classroom instruction, and then we'd have to like shift all of our funding around to like make sure that it met those requirements. It would be a lot of unnecessary paperwork and hassle. But that's one that's out there. There's another one in the Assembly and the Senate requiring access to youth by youth-serving organizations that are nationally vetted. And so what the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts want is access to our kids during the school day to solicit for their organizations. And I understand that those organizations are having trouble recruiting, but it seems like an odd requirement to open up schools to make sure that just those groups get access to.
During the school day?
During the school day.
How would that work?
What folks have talked about is like, well, after they come in from recess, as, you know, they'll be able, like, at the end of recess, you know, the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts could hand out flyers and talk to the kids. If you've seen After Recess, especially in winter, it's a nightmare.
travesty.
There's pants going this way and boots over there, and everything's wet, and kids are freaking out, and you're just trying to get back in the classroom so that you can like get on with life. And so that's one where we would all like special access to schools to solicit. We're very clear about those boundaries. We don't want to privilege one group or another.
Seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen, many lawsuits
Oh,
waiting to
it
happen.
has been. As a former district executive for the Scouts in town here, it's a terrible precedent, like,
And I was a Girl Scout troop leader for 4 years, but I wouldn't want to do it during the school day.
yeah.
And we try
I'm
and
sure
work
there's
fairly.
transportation of kids and stuff, like if it could be a club, the way some schools have a club hour or something. Like I can see what they're going for, but I agree, it's a bad.
It's a bad precedent.
And we work closely with Boy and Girl Scouts to create clubs in our schools and to find space, and they get to use our buildings for free, and we work with them on open houses to put up flyers and tables if they're interested. So at the right time, in the right place, and in close partnership, but the school day is sacred. That's when we're trying to educate kids, so. There's another one about military recruiters. Some schools are very anti-military recruiters, you know, trying to respond to their parents' interests in more liberal parts of our state. In other places, it's not an issue. And so this bill is requiring schools to allow military recruiters into public spaces like cafeterias during portions of the day, as opposed to just in like classrooms, which are kind of segregated from students. This one, to me, seems like a local control issue. You know, military recruiters are allowed to access schools by law. You know, where they are, I would want to respond to like the will of the community at this time in this place. That one is one where I prefer a little bit of local control. I've seen it different ways in different places. And then the last one is the WIAA is a Senate bill. They want open records. They want the WIAA to be treated like a public organization, not a private organization. And so they're looking to create like open records requests around the WIAA to get involved in WIAA business. The WIAA is a private organization that schools belong to and pay membership to through dues. So we are a part of the WIAA. And we have an annual meeting and processes where we can change the bylaws and all of that. To open up our private organizations in the state to public scrutiny through the state legislature is scary to me. You know, maybe it's the WIAA first, but what's next? You know, the private organizations we all belong to support our businesses or our careers. You know, the Realtors Association, you know, the advocacy organizations we belong to. It's just a bad precedent in my mind, and I'd be nervous about where that's going. So, those are some bills that are out there. Happy to take any questions. If you feel strongly about any of them, you know, I can give you more information to advocate. They're only in their education committees right now. It'll be in the near future when they hit the Assembly or Senate floor. If they get through an education committee, that it's time to like worry about it. But that's just some situational awareness for where they're at.
Historically, how many of these ever see the light of day? I mean, I know a few of them probably will, but I mean, some of these are just grasping at straws, it seems like, and they're throwing, you know what, against the wall, see what sticks.
Yeah, I think, you know, maybe a half to a quarter will get to the floor and be debated. You know, some will be refined, you know, in the committees. A lot of them are just, you know, like, I ran on this platform, so I'm gonna bring forward my issue, and then the chair of that committee says like, all right, you can bring your issue forward, and then they all vote it down. It's like, and then they say, I did it, guys, I brought it, you know? So a lot of it's a bit performative, but it gives you kind of an idea how people are thinking about things, you know? And what's interesting to me is just like this, you know, there's always that tension between local control and state accountability. You know, that is always something to look at. And
Well,
then
state and national too.
totally,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, where do people want power to lie? That's something that I'm always thinking about. So. That's all I had on legislative advocacy. If there's no further questions there, we can transition to Fund 80, Community Services. I got this in paper version, if that works for folks a little bit better.
As you pass them out, I would think there's some discussion of what if this Department of Education is eliminated?
You would hope so. It's still, I mean, it's still such early days in considering like what funding streams would move to labor or to commerce or, you know, however, what programs would be axed. It's like, it's just so, it's so labyrinthine, you know, as to,
Yeah, Department of Ed,
Thank you, sir.
there's a little bit of accountability with the Department of Ed, but primarily they're just a bill payer for us. They cut checks to Wisconsin, which gets passed through to us. So the state of Wisconsin receives, I think it's about $860 million in Title I and special education funding, which gets passed through to school districts. And the state receives about $250 million in school nutrition funding that gets passed through to school districts. And so, if they get rid of the Department of Ed, as long as they're still paying the bills, not a big difference, I'm fine with that. If they stop paying the bills or it gets delayed, that's a real problem. You know, Title I funding, that's millions of dollars for us. That would represent 20 teachers probably that didn't work for us any longer. School nutrition funding, if we don't have free lunch, that's half our kids. You know, that would be a big deal. You know, so it's important money. Once again, local control's not the worst thing in the world, and so a little less federal oversight, I won't sniff at, but we do want the funds that make a real difference in our kids' lives.
Yes.
We pay federal taxes to fund them.
That too, and there are, so there's the impoundment principle. This happened under Nixon. There's a Supreme Court case that said if the legislature, the Senate, and the House allocate funds, the administration is required to spend them on the thing they said they were funded for. And so I don't see these provisions going away unless the House and the Senate can wrap their head around a change in those allocations, which would be really, really hard, because every single school district in the country benefits from special education funding. Nearly everyone benefits from title funding, and nearly every district benefits from school nutrition funding. So those seem like really hard things to take away from people.
I agree, but.
Yeah, but, exactly. So, Scott mentioned throwing stuff at walls. This is throwing spaghetti at a wall. Just want to throw that out there first. This is blue sky, big ideas, maybe ridiculous ideas, but I just wanted to think about Community Services Fund a little bit differently for a moment. I put in some information there about the law, you know, that covers it. You know, Fund 80 may be used for programs and services that are outside the regular curriculum, would not continue without Fund 80, are not considered essential to school functions, and are available to any resident student. I think of the Community Service Fund as a way to address opportunity gaps. You know, we saw today in our AGR report that there are achievement gaps. Some kids do better than others on these tests. And if you think about why that's the case, it comes from different life experiences, starting from a very early age, different opportunities that they've had, and that continue all the way through high school. Research identifies a number of the root causes of the opportunity gap: home environment, high-quality early childhood education, neighborhood advantage, elementary classroom environment, organized after-school activities, and family income to needs. These all increase achievement gaps when there's differences between kids. And we've been able to partner with our community in a lot of different ways to mitigate those opportunity gaps for kids. We've got some key strategies in Fund 80 that we talked about last year, and I highlight some Fund 80 programs that we're already doing that are pretty great. But theoretically, there's lots of different ways you could use Fund 80 to make a huge impact in our school district, ranging from a $16 million pool all the way down to a small budget for our community schools programs to be able to do great things for our neighborhoods. And so I just wanted to throw some of these ideas out there, and there's even more that you could contemplate. But one of those would be potentially a new pool at Logan. The pool is not usable for competition. It hasn't, in recent years, really been the place where our kids practice anymore. You know, for physical education, it meets minimal needs, but it isn't inspiring. You know, so it's something that we could consider as a mechanism for constructing a new pool. That's a big idea. That's a lot of money. I don't know that I would actually go that far.
So when's the last time it was used for competition?
I don't know the last time it was used for competition.
It's gotta be
Probably when I was
15,
there.
gotta be 15 years at least.
Yeah, it doesn't meet some requirements for competition any longer.
Yeah. Diving,
Well, certainly diving, but I don't know if it's the length or the depth is off for competition.
I don't doubt.
Yeah.
And the 16 million would solve for that?
That'd be a new pool, yeah.
How many kids? are
And
in
then
this
another
one?
16 million for Central, because they'll want one.
Exactly.
That's been on the wish list, I saw. Yeah.
Yeah, third floor
That
addition.
no timeline element of the capital plan.
And like I said, this is a really big idea. Like, it's not entirely serious, but it is possible. I mean, if that was something that our community rallied behind and wanted, it would be a potential option to consider.
Yeah. The size of the swim team is not markedly less than over the past 10 years or so.
And there's always a, if you build it, they will come sort of deal, But, and I think in a community like La Crosse, on a river, in a state like Wisconsin and near Minnesota with lakes, swimming instruction is life-saving. And so
Agreed.
having access to that across our community at an early age, and continually throughout life, I think is a really important skill for kids to have. Doesn't mean that we have to build a new pool to make that happen, but swimming instruction is important, and having a pool accessible on the north side and the south side, I think is a really important feature and amenity in our community.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice if the city wouldn't close down our public pools and we need to keep those going, which is important to both north and south side.
Yeah.
And, that is an area where in other communities, like when I was in Gaelic Trumpelow, we operated the pool as a school district through Fund 80. And if the city, for some reason financially, could no longer operate the pool, that is an area where as a school district, we might be able to fill the gap through Fund 80. Maybe it's not building a new pool, but maybe it's, all right, what are these operational costs? Could the school district, through this fund, help out and partner with the city on something? That is a potential option as we move forward. All right, another really big idea. A childcare voucher.
Because we love vouchers.
We love vouchers, right?
Well, if they go to
But-
actually poor kids who need childcare.
Theoretically, we could, because providing childcare is a clear use of Fund 80 that has been established across school districts in the state. We could provide it ourselves and levy through Fund 80. We have found through personal experience that us stepping into the daycare arena in this school district isn't maybe wise. However, we could create an opportunity for parents, based on income, to access high-quality childcare by levying money and providing them that opportunity. It would have a monumental effect on the early childhood quality that families experience and do substantial things for our educational needs just a few years down the road. It's a huge bill, but it would be only about $1 on the mill rate, and it would be distributed across the entire community as opposed to just the families that need to pay it. When I look at the cost of 2 kids in childcare, I mean, $24,000 a year, I mean, that makes, and it's unaffordable.
This could even be something where the city and us could join forces on, because they're going through the same
You'd hope, yeah.
issues.
Yeah, totally, we could share the cost in some way.
How would we
How is this
create
different
spaces?
than the funding that the counties provide for low-income families for childcare? I know they have to have regulated care. Finding any care is the bigger problem, I think. But how is this different than the funding that's already being provided through the county, which is funded by the state and the federal level for low-income childcare?
Yeah, so so I put together a model for this a few years ago, and it's based on that SHARES program. And SHARES provides free childcare and then income prorated after a certain point. And so we wouldn't have to reimburse the cost of any free family or the SHARES portion that would already be provided. We'd be filling the gap for families up to a certain point and then income prorated thereafter. So kind of expanding the SHARES program locally for families that don't currently qualify and covering the difference for other families. Just a thought for how to approach something that's a real struggle in our community that could make a huge difference. People have dipped their toes into childcare at much smaller amounts. This is kind of a big, hairy idea to throw out there and just kind of contemplate what might be possible. Jim?
How's that fit into, is it Kurt Reese that is working on community engagement now?
Yeah, Kurt Teff, we're working with
Yeah,
early
yeah.
education impact coordination, kind of bringing people together at the table. One thing that we really do really well that we're proud of as a school district is like kind of lead collaborator. and allowing other organizations to use their expertise to deliver services and impact. We've found a niche in terms of bringing people together, but the parenting place does great stuff on parenting and diaper banks, and Gunderson does great stuff on early childhood education for parents, prenatal and postnatal, leveraging the expertise in our community.
I feel like, sorry.
Yeah.
I like the idea of this, but it doesn't seem like it does anything to address. I think Deb raises this point. There's no greater capacity as a result of this, except further downstream as we expand opportunities so that parents who are like maybe on that cusp are able to access the resources more and thus be competitive in an already competitive market. Ideally, that would say, hey, if you're interested in opening a childcare, there's need in La Crosse, but we already have that, and it's hard enough to get people into the space. I wonder what actual impact this would make in who's getting childcare exactly, right? Like if it's not aimed at expanding capacity, and I agree with you, like dipping our own toes into that as a public entity in a competitive marketplace doesn't necessarily make sense either, and isn't something people necessarily want us to do, but.
Yeah, the economics of it could potentially increase wages across the area, attracting more people to our area to do childcare in the existing facilities, maximizing their capacity. The stability of revenue might encourage new people to get into the business and to attract people in new ways to the area. I was thinking about like what would be the tax impact for an organization like Quick Trip, because you had $1 on the mill rate, that's a lot, right? And my estimate was they'd pay about $50,000 to $60,000 of additional tax. But I know that at Quick Trip Childcare, they're paying a lot more than $50,000 a year to support their own childcare venture. They might see this as like, wow, I'd rather just do that than have to run my own childcare organization.
I agree, but I think the point is brought up, I recently just sold Red Balloon,
Yeah,
the business, right? I mean, they're building, because they went down from 2 to 1, because one is, it isn't the need for it, it's finding the help,
totally.
so that we have to find some happy medium there. I don't know if it's being able to help increase, teacher costs, or wages or what, but that's the other struggle. It's
Totally.
not just where people can't afford it, it cannot be sustainable at what they currently have, trying to pay people to do it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
And regarding the Quick Trip example, we have to be really careful. We don't want to be levying tax dollars to save Quick Trip money. That's not the business that we're in. So I want to be real careful as we have that conversation.
Totally the case. I'm just thinking about political interest by various powerful organizations in our community. I would be interested in this because it would have a substantial positive impact on the early childhood experiences that students entering the school district would have.
Agreed.
I also think about it, our job isn't to make La Crosse super attractive, except that our education makes La Crosse super attractive. And if you found out that you could get free childcare for your children if you moved to La Crosse, imagine what that would do to making this community a destination, for workers, for employees.
And that's, to that point, we're losing a lot of our young married couples that have children because of that. I mean, not because of the childcare, but that would actually keep them here and bring them there, so that has some merit to it, definitely.
So, big idea, throwing it out there. The third one is middle school athletics and co-curriculars. This is an area where some school districts have moved these costs into Fund 80. They have to make them accessible to the community then as a result. There might be a homeschool student or two that's interested, or a private school student that might want to participate. But the result is that you don't have to think about cutting those opportunities with tight budgets. And that's what a lot of school districts have had to think about, You know, we need these interventionists, we need behavior specialists at the elementary school. We need, you know, a couple $100,000 to make that happen. We have to weigh the difference between intervening at an early age with behavior or this kind of less important thing, middle school athletics and co-curriculars. And so what they've been able to do is move that over into Fund 80 because they would have to cut it otherwise. They wouldn't be able to offer it. And it frees up that space to do the essential things in your school district that are really important. And so it's just something to think about, you know, would this be a mechanism for us to respond to some of those teacher needs around behavior intervention at the elementary level by moving middle school athletics into Fund 80? You know, so that's something to consider as an option. Next, there's a series of potential partnerships, and I think about these in terms of creating equal opportunities for our students to access the great things going on in our community, where we don't currently have equal access. One of those is a potential partnership with Aura, the Outdoor Recreation Alliance. They just purchased the Trail Farm and are in the process of developing it. We're already partnering with them, and we've had kids out there a couple of times, and we're working with them through our FFA program to talk about crops and maybe livestock out there. We're really excited about what could be. But what we're finding is there's barriers to accessing that property. We need transportation. We need people to help arrange these trips. If our teachers have to figure it out themselves on top of everything else they're doing, it's gonna be difficult to get kids to that space with high-quality lessons. And the stuff Aura is proposing is really phenomenal. History, geology, outdoor recreation, adventure ed, environmental ed, just really cool stuff. And if there is somebody to help be the point person for that, to coordinate it, to develop lessons, to a little bit of funds to take care of transportation, we would have like an amazing amenity, essentially a school forest with all the different opportunities you could imagine right here in La Crosse, just outside of the city boundaries. And so that's something we've been imagining in collaboration over the last couple of months, like what could be there. But currently we don't have the funding, nor do they, to make this sort of amazing partnership happen.
If you haven't been out to the site, Oliver's dad gives really great presentations. He's kind of running the show there. And what they're planning on doing in terms of reserving some of the space for agricultural work and rewilding the natural prairies, like the educational opportunities are huge out there. It's gonna be such an amazing amenity for everyone. Like, this feels like a great idea to me.
I have concerns about the amount, especially since the actual busing cost is only $25,000. And administrative services are $45,000, and this would cover a new staff I mean, on surface level, yes, you painted a really nice picture. The Trail Farm project is just over halfway to the goal of meeting their $6 million goal, so it's not a complete project, so I think this idea is maybe a little premature. We've had Wiscor in town forever that has been trying to engage us in this exact type of thing, but we haven't, and we could probably engage them as a partner at a much better deal. Honestly, and I mean, and Grow La Crosse has been doing work for free, no cost to the district, and, but, I mean, they've had some assistance from Joe, but they've raised all their own money for 10 years at least. And their budget is much more conservative and would have a higher impact on a broader amount of students, because their project would touch every 4th and 5th grader 6 times a school year with lessons that tie into their core curriculum. So
I wasn't asking anybody to sharpen their pencil or to dream small. I was asking when I talk to folks to like, go, so it's not necessarily the end all be all. It's more the concept and the idea of what could this be and to dream about it. So. Yeah, no, but your concerns are all relevant and pertinent, and there are other potential opportunities in different ways, for sure.
I really appreciate Katie's comments. this is a conversation to think big picture, and we're not agreeing to anything, and so I don't want to rain on the parade too much. But as I look at the list, like, we could create a list 10 times as long with many, many more community partners, and so, like, who are we picking and why are we picking them? I think I'd rather focus on, like, what's the outdoor education goal versus who's our partner. I think that would make this feel more comfortable to me, or whatever the area is. I feel like, in a way, this looks like our best friends list, who we want to work. I mean, there's a lot of great partners in our community, and the way this is listed, it just makes me a little nervous, like, why are some not on here? So maybe if we want to look at the list in terms of ideas versus who we're partnering with, might be more helpful.
I think that's a great way to think about it. You know, there are folks that reach out to me and want to partner and are active and engaged, and those are the folks I end up talking to more than others. There's plenty of other great organizations that don't reach out, that aren't actively trying to pursue something, and so it's harder to make those connections. Katie, you mentioned Grow. That's another great one. This is an area where there's awesome programs going on at our schools right now, but not every student has access to these programs. There isn't a Grow Garden at every elementary school. And even at the elementary schools where there are Grow programs, there's different experiences there based on how they have to raise those funds. Sometimes there's a PTO that's able to raise it. Sometimes people have to fight for grants to pay for that service. And other times they're just scraping up money out of our budgets to kind of cover the cost. And the programming is so awesome and so cool. And it's not only on site, it's also at greenhouses. It does a lot of great things for our kids. And so there's an opportunity to make sure that this is an equal opportunity for all students in our school district and sustainable at the same time. And so this is another great one where there's a little write-up that they provided, doing great things for a decade here in La Crosse, and an opportunity to kind of make this a consistent opportunity for all of our students.
I think to Deb's point about, you know, identifying our larger goal first, like that seems to be it, right? Is we already have that mission, right, of equal access to all of the things that are already happening. So to Katie, your point, with everything that Grow has been doing, ensuring that opportunity remains open universally in the district, I think is a good goal and speaks to the larger.
They're a proven partner, and I
Yeah.
think to make, like, this feels like a long time coming type of decision.
Totally.
If this is what it comes to, I mean, they've been a great
Yeah.
partner for a long time.
Yeah.
And to make sure that all students in the district have access to it is a great idea.
I'm particularly invested in the idea, in the statistic about up to 3 times more fruit and vegetables being eaten in schools. And it's always, it's wonderful to get kids out into the garden just in principle and everything. I sometimes question, like, well, you know, how much produce are they actually able to make, and are students benefiting in a meaningful way in terms of their overall nutrition? But like the long-term benefits of building those habits, building that knowledge base, I think that's nothing to scoff at.
It's actually evidence-based too, so I was in full disclosure, I was on the Grow Board when they first started up about 10 years ago and wrote a lot of their first grants. And because the grants we were writing locally obviously wouldn't have funded a full-blown research project to prove the benefits of school gardening on kids, we relied on other national and international studies on similar programs. And just like the process of watching something grow from seed into a vegetable, it's not about how much of that vegetable you consume through your school garden, which is usually with, you know, square foot gardening method, raised
Right.
beds. It's not gonna fill your plate on the salad bar every day, but the experiential learning process is what engages students in a way that does promote healthier eating long-term.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Another one, La Crosse community, did somebody else?
I would say, I think there's a lot of good ideas here. I think it's our job now. I think you brought a whole list of things that would be good for a lot of different kids for a lot of different reasons. I think we have to sort through it and say which ones do we really like best and what money is there to support it.
Yeah, and the money, that's a good point, like, there's the general thing, but then, we're also thoughtful about taxpayers and, what they're paying, and, sometimes the state funding model shifts. We'll find out with the new biennium, and our taxes might go up outside of our control, and so adding on additional cost in a given year might not be super politically the right idea, and so it's more than just do we want to, it's also the finances of it all. It's being thoughtful about when to do it, maybe there's an opportunity in the future, but right now is not the time, so maybe there's more proof of concept that needs to happen before you launch something. So there's lots of different considerations in this process. A few others here: Lacrosse Community Theater Partnership. We've had a great summer school partnership lately, but we don't have daily theater and drama education. It's something that's tracked by the state. They have educators who could potentially provide this at a lower cost than it would be for us to provide it ourselves. So there's a potential opportunity there. Our future centers with Lacrosse Promise has been thinking about expanding work down to the middle schools to create unique opportunities that other school districts, middle schoolers don't have access to. And so that might be something to think about. Partnering with the Good Fight Way. They do great stuff on attendance and have done some really neat programming at our middle schools, at Logan and Longfellow over the last few years. And I think, that's an opportunity where they've got 3-4 years of experience with us that we could start to invest in to continue to promote good attendance and second chance rides and unique cultural and family connections in our community. 9 is a community schools coordinators budget. We have the positions, but they have to fundraise before they can actually do anything. So they spend a lot of time like finding donations here, donations there, as opposed to actually doing the good work that they need to do on a daily basis, which is great. But, they could be even more effective right out the gate, being able to provide some basic, simple necessities in our community. And then lastly, we kind of organize these from kind of top dollar down to bottom. Providing an inflationary increase for our school resource officer program to account for changes in expenses. It is something that we calculate on an annual basis based on the actual wages of the folks, 75% of 75%. The total cost could actually go down in a given year depending on how much those, experience those folks have or whatever else is going on. But it's just something to put on your radar as, when we're working with our partners, thinking about what changes over time and being thoughtful about that relationship. So, just a bunch of spaghetti I threw at the wall. Like others have said, I could come up with 10 or 20 more of these sorts of things. But thinking about them in terms of opportunity gaps, how do we, if we want all of our students to achieve at the high levels we want them to, what are the unique levers we could pull to create engaging, welcoming, exciting places where kids get their needs met along the way from birth all the way through graduation? And maybe that's a way to think about it. What are our bigger goals, like folks have said, our key levers that we want to pull? And maybe there's nothing on this list that's that's the right answer right now. But these are things that are possible. And they're ways we could partner with our community to make a real material difference in our kids' lives. So,
Can I belabor a metaphor to ask a question? So if we put some of the spaghetti onto our Fund 80 plate, is it pushing off mashed peas, or, you know what I mean? Where are the trade-offs in the budget, in other words? It's a terrible metaphor, I apologize for that one, everybody.
yeah. We wouldn't have to take our fork and scrape off the peas, but we could keep everything, but there are fiscal impacts, right? There's a tax impact for these sorts of things. So I think we have to be prudent and thoughtful and kind of pick key things. And maybe there's a larger analysis and that we identify some key levers we want to pull, and maybe something that's on our plate right now isn't the right one right now anymore. Or maybe it did its work and it succeeded and we can sunset it. That's a possibility too.
Because we would be adding an additional levy on top of what we're already doing for Fund 80 in order to fund any and/or all of these kinds of initiatives.
Correct, if we didn't remove anything, yeah.
Right, okay.
And in the end, this is really just the beginning of the conversation, because when the decision needs to be made is in October, when we're passing budgets, correct, in regard to Fund 80? I mean, well, obviously,
Yeah.
we have to have a game plan ahead of time, but I mean, the final vote on the budget happens in October.
There's a number of decision points. We bring this back in July. like in advance of bringing it in August for a vote so that we can go forward before the school year starts. Ultimately, the levy is levied in October. If we were thinking about this from like a hiring standpoint, you'd want to be making decisions, program decisions now, so you could hire good people that were in place at the beginning of the school year.
I think Deb had a question.
Deb?
Yeah, so for new members, Fund 80 is something that's happened, I don't know, in the last 20-ish years that allows us, again, within the parameters that have been defined, that we can levy additional dollars. It isn't this doesn't fit in with the levy limits or any of that. And so it is an opportunity for us to be able to levy additional dollars. I think every good conversation has to start out with a blue sky conversation. But as has been said, I think we need to temper it with, our community's been very generous with the operating referendum, with the capital referendum, and then how much more are we gonna add on just because we can? And that's where, all these ideas are good. We'd be all Grinches if we say we didn't like any of them. They're all good for kids. What's our priority? And I think that's what we have to try to figure out as we move forward. And I'd like to have another conversation on this to kind of synthesize this down before July, because just to have a presentation in July and then have to vote on it in August, I think there's so much meat here and so many good ideas. I think, I don't want to feel rushed into a decision in August. I want to make sure it's a meaningful conversation that we have.
Yeah, to your point, Deb, last year we brought some ideas in July. Folks felt rushed, didn't feel comfortable. We got to the finish line on some new things, and it was exciting, and we're doing great stuff with that. And so the idea here was to bring it earlier, and just to start the conversation and start talking. And maybe none of this list goes anywhere. You know, it's like, interesting, this isn't the year because of a variety of reasons. Or maybe there's something small, or maybe there's one big thing. But the idea here was just to bring it forward, to open the discussion, to get folks thinking in terms of partnerships with the city, partnerships with community organizations. What are the key levers we want to pull to make a material difference in the academic and life outcomes of our students?
And I love the big ideas here because people are asking, like, what's your vision? What do you want? What do you want the school district to be? And this seems like a place where that can really happen. So, thank you.
Well, and maybe this fits into, we had talked previously about a vision. I don't know where that's necessarily at. And then, and we're talking about possibly expanding some of this. Are there programs that are struggling that we should maybe start cutting off because they're just not doing what their intention was?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it begs an evaluation of our existing programs with some sort of evidence about how they're working, you know, as we assess those. You know, that was something a number of years ago we did with our school resource officer program. We evaluated it, we came up with metrics to evaluate it, and we've had a pretty logical and consistent way to measure the effectiveness of that program and if it's meeting our established goals. And there's ways to think about the other programs in there as well. Scott's got to get out of here, so it seems like a sign for all of us.
Yes. All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, bye Deb.
See ya.
Have fun.
Yeah, another day on the beach tomorrow.